From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, near-death experiences. Here's what's happening. Well, the heat waves batter in Europe and the United States in July this month have been virtually impossible, they say, without human-induced climate change, according to a scientific study. Global warming from burning fossil fuels also made the heat wave affecting parts of China 50 times more likely. Almost all societies remained unprepared, they say, for extreme deadly heat, according to the experts. Well, the Federal Reserve has done it again. It raised its benchmark lending rate by a quarter point Wednesday, lifting interest rates to the highest level in 22 years. It's the 11th rate increase since the Fed began its inflation fight in March of 2022. Federal officials are estimating one more rate hike this year, according to their latest set of projections. Investment analyst Mish Shedlock with us here. Mish, is it working or not?
Pretty much scripted here today, George. The announcement hardly said anything at all. I mean, it was totally expected. Usually there's some sort of fireworks, or they try and pin Powell down in the Q&A that lasts for 40 minutes or so after the meeting. Nothing substantial came out of that. The one thing that Powell kept repeating was the lags. They're talking about the lags in interest rate policy before it begins to affect the economic activity. He mentioned that word several times, and the reporters kept trying to pin him down into saying, well, are we going to do every other hike or every other month now? He wouldn't budge. He wouldn't give them any more details. Of course, there's no more details to give. They really don't know. There's more than one lag in play here, George. The Fed didn't mention the other one, and that's a big lag that happens with about a 2 or 3 year lag after a big round of fiscal stimulus. That was a massive round of fiscal stimulus, 3 rounds actually, 2 under Trump, 1 under President Biden, injected just trillions of dollars worth of free money into the economy. At the same time, they also paused, people from paying back their mortgages. No one could be evicted. All of that stuff now is starting to come home. We're seeing banks react to that in credit application rates. A year ago, an application for a car loan was only going to be rejected 1 or 2% of the time. That's now up to 14%.
Wow,
so we're seeing a huge tightening of credit. The same applies to credit cards, but auto loans is the real standout now. The Fed would like to pause, but they don't want to say that. But they get lucky here, or I don't know, just actually by a schedule, luck in the break of the schedule. The next meeting's not for 2 months, George. So the Fed we're going to have a couple of more reports of the CPI, the PCE, consumer spending. The Fed will look at that and see. The economists are penciling in one more hike in September is what it looks like here. Data dependent, as the Fed says. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. New home sales were down again this month. Industrial production was down again this month. I talked about the credit card application application rejection rates for cars, and we're also seeing a 92-day inventory of EVs pile up on builder lots. That's what Biden wants to push. The dealers are having a hard time selling those. It looks like the consumer is starting to weaken here, George.
Everything's slowing down, Mish. Thank you.
Nothing compares to you.
Irish singer and activist Sinead O'Connor has died at the age of 56. Her family announced the news with great sadness, saying her family and friends are devastated. The cause of death has not been made public. She was best known for her single, what you just heard, Nothing Compares to You, released in 1990, which reached #1 and brought her worldwide fame. Last year, she lost her 17-year-old son, Shane, to suicide, and she was devastated ever since. Dead at the age of 56, Sinead O'Connor. In many states, Americans can now ditch their physical wallet and verify their identity simply by tapping their device on a scanner. And just as digital wallets from Apple and Google have made the commerce more efficient and convenient, digital ID systems could potentially make government interactions faster and more efficient. But what does that mean in terms of government surveillance? Let's check in with the author of The Global Brain, Howard Bloom. Howard, what do you think of this one?
Well, there's something astonishing in the story of digital IDs. We Americans traditionally led the world with our technologies and our infrastructure. That is no longer the case. Our roadways and airports make us look like a third world country. Even our water and sewage systems are antiques from nearly 100 or 200 years ago and are crumbling under our feet. That's also true of digital IDs. We are woefully behind. A digital ID simplifies your life. It allows you to get into a movie theater or get on a bus simply by showing your smartphone. It also lets you pay your electricity and phone bill, see your bank account, get access to your kids' grades, let your child look up tonight's homework assignment, file for unemployment, get something notarized, register your new company, and even control your privacy and the use of your personal data from your laptop or your phone. But there's a problem. Digital IDs have been around since 1999, when Finland first allowed banks to issue them. They've been around for nearly a quarter of a century. Since their kickoff, at least 36 countries have adopted digital IDs. Meanwhile, in America, we seem to be afraid that digital IDs would lead to a totalitarian government controlling our every move. In the 36 countries with digital IDs, that simply isn't happening. First of all, no one has all your information. It's distributed among banks, hospitals, doctors, and the organizations you do business with. What's more, in countries like Estonia, which leads the world in digital ID development, you can see every time someone tries to access your information. In fact, you can see the date, the time, and who it is. If your information is being abused, you can file a complaint that can be handled immediately and electronically, the way an Amazon support complaint is handled within hours. For example, one user in Estonia discovered that her fiancé, a policeman, was teaming up with a health worker to look up her medical records before the wedding. She complained. The policeman was fined over $50. Digital IDs are, and nobody knows whether the marriage took place or not. Digital IDs are already ancient technology. India got on board with digital IDs in 2009, and now 1.2 billion Indians have digital IDs. Those digital IDs in India are lifesavers. A third of the population of India had no way to prove who they were, no birth certificates or driver's licenses, no papers. These people had no access to banks and no access to government services like pensions. With digital IDs, that problem is solved. As the International Monetary Fund puts it now, millions of people in the formal and vast informal economy of India can accept payments, settle invoices, and transfer funds anywhere in the country with just a few screen taps. Then there's voting electronically, something that's possible when you can prove who you are with an electronic ID. Estonia began electronic voting in 2001. It's worked out brilliantly. Among other things, electronic voting allows you to change your vote as many times as you like before Election Day. If we were to institute electronic voting here using electronic IDs backed up by biometrics, the way Estonia does it, the cries of voter fraud might end. But we are way behind the rest of the world. Apple tried to turn your iPhone into your digital driver's license and digital ID in 2021. It's 2 years later, and so far only 4 states have bought into the idea. The big obstacle to digital IDs is fear. Some of us are still hooked on dark visions of men in black helicopters sent by some hidden globalist elite to take over our cities, or Bill Gates planting microchips in our bloodstream, not to mention a totalitarian takeover of what some call radical Democrats, communists, and fascists. None of these fantasies are real. It's time to turn America from fear to hope. It's time for us to see the promise in new technologies not just the menace. We are behind, but we must lead.
Interesting path we are going down, Howard. I'll tell you that. 3 retired military veterans testified today at a House hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, we call them UFOs, warning that the sightings are a national security problem and that the government has been too secretive about them. A House Oversight Subcommittee convened Wednesday's hearings on UFOs as the lawmakers who pushed for the hearing are calling for the government to be more forthcoming about the unidentified anomalous phenomena. Coast guest Stephen Bassett from the Paradigm Research Group was at that hearing today. Stephen, what's your observation?
It was remarkable. Went extremely well. About half the questions were scripted, half were not. There was a great emphasis on nonpartisanship. Everybody behaved very well. The 3 witnesses were absolutely solid. David Grush, of course, was the star witness.
Yeah.
Sitting behind him was Charles McCullough, former Intelligence Community IG, Inspector General, and former DNI Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Little support there. He was repeatedly asked about the issue of non-human technology, crash vehicles, and non-human bodies in our possession. He indicated that that was the case, but then he was asked about the details, and he said, I would have to go into a SCIF or a secret compartmental information facility repeatedly, and that, of course, just gave more heaviness to his testimony. So it was very powerful. There's going to be a lot of news coverage. I know that afterwards the witnesses did go into SCIFs, and I think in a SCIF, and were interviewed for hours. And I think some other people that weren't testifying that they were interviewed. So the intelligence community insiders are now lining up, getting together, decide how to proceed, because they know that the end of the truth embargo is close at hand.
You've been talking about this, Stephen, for 20, 30 years. Do you feel vindicated?
I just feel happy that we're moving towards this major breakthrough. Happy to be a part of it, and thrilled to see the energy in the room. There was a lot of people there in the hall, got there very early. Most of them couldn't get in, but they went upstairs and were able to watch on television. This is happening, George. Next to it, you want to expect a hearing in front of the Senate Intel Committee when they return from recess, and that one could set the world on fire and probably put an end to the truth embargo.
You got it. Stephen, thank you so much. Stephen Bassett from the Paradigm Research Group. Tomorrow in our news segment, our George Knapp, who was at the hearing, will talk with us about his observations. In a moment, we're going to be talking about Under the Eye of Power, how fear of secret societies shapes American democracy. Colin Dickey back with us on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Colin Dickey grew up in San Jose, California, a few miles from the Winchester Mystery House, and the most haunted house in America, by the way. As a writer, speaker, academic, he has made a career of collecting strange objects and hidden histories all over the country. He's a regular contributor to the LA Review of Books, Lampham's Quarterly, and is the co-editor with Joanna Epstein of the Morbid Anatomy Anthology. He's also a member of the Order of the Good Death, a collection of artists, writers, and death industry professionals interested in improving the Western world's relationship with mortality, Ph.D. in literature from the University of Southern California. Colin, welcome back. How have you been?
Hey, thanks so much for having me back on. I've been good. I've been well. How you been?
Great. Under the Eye of Power, how did you get involved in secret societies?
Oh, man. I mean, I think there's been so much talk in the past couple of, years or whatever about, the Illuminati and other stuff. And I wanted to kind of figure out how far all of this went back. So I decided to kind of do a deep dive sort of historically. I feel like we talk a lot about what's happening right now, but we don't talk about where this stuff comes from. So I started to do the long history and sort of figure out how far back these ideas stretch, how far back these secret societies stretch, how long have we been concerned about them, what have they done at other moments in history, and just try to give us a kind of long history that explained the whole thing over a couple hundred years. So that was the idea. That kind of set me down this road, and here I am now.
When you were with me some time ago, not too long ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about, I think, your work, The Unidentified, the mythical monsters. Remember that one?
Yeah, exactly, right. And this kind of grew a little bit out of that one. With that one, I was more focused on Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, the lost continents in Atlantis, and of course UFOs, which obviously are very much in the news today. And I think one of the things that I got out of that and sort of looking at, our history of UFOs and government cover-ups and that kind of stuff is to really try and figure out how that extended to a kind of larger view of various sort of theories about how, things are being hidden from us. People are kind of working behind the scenes to keep stuff out of the public eye. And that kind of led me down this road of, these secret societies and whether or not there's any truth to any of them.
Is there a paranoia about secret societies, or is it justified?
I mean, what I found is doing this book, I found a little bit of both. I found a lot of stuff that, it's pretty hard to prove. It's pretty hard to justify. And I found a lot of stuff that turned out to be, factually correct. And I think some of these examples I think are pretty well known. I started to just kind of look at, anything that was a group of people working in secret behind the scenes to kind of break the law or violate civil liberties or something like that. And some of the kind of unexpectedly obvious things I found were things like, the Underground Railroad, which fits that mode. These were people working in secret to violate the fugitive slave law, which was a horribly unjust law. So, good for them. So, I think we have had moments in our past where we have seen groups kind of doing this stuff, and I think other stuff has been, a little bit harder to prove and a little bit harder to verify. And so I wanted to kind of see if I could understand better what made for a legitimate conspiracy and what was maybe a little bit more far-fetched.
Colin, one group that keeps coming up on this program is Freemasonry and the Freemasons. And there's all kinds of discussions, whether they're good or bad, evil or not. What do you think?
Yeah, I found it so fascinating to do the history of the Freemasons. I think one of the things I found really interesting is I don't think we would have had this country without the Freemasons in some form, and that's good or bad depending on your perspective. But I think that the early founders, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, these guys were all Masons, and what they wanted, I think, when I really looked into what they were looking for, is they wanted a kind of aristocracy like the British had, but they didn't want it based on nobility and ancestry. They didn't want you to have to be born into it. They wanted it to be something that everybody could access. And joining the Freemasons was kind of a way of them being able to do that. So they would have these elaborate Freemasonry parades in Philadelphia and Boston, and they would show off their finery and their aprons and whatnot. And they were very public about it, and that's why there's all these Freemasonry symbols in the government on the $1 bill and all that stuff, because they weren't trying to hide it. It was very public, but it was this idea that they wanted to sort of display that they were kind of the first among equals, and they had sort of proven themselves to be kind of stalwarts of what an American citizen was going to be. And you can disagree with that estimation of whether or not they were right, but I think that's what they were trying to do. So I think we end up with a country that kind of found its footing through people adopting Freemasonry for better or for ill, I think.
What would you say in your research, Colin, did you stumble across that was one of the weirdest things that has happened in this country over the years?
Oh man, I mean, there's a lot of
There's many of them.
Stuff. Yeah, I mean, how much time do you have tonight, George?
You've got 2 hours with us tonight.
I think one of the weirdest stories that I came across was this guy, this ex-French priest. His name was Chiniquy, and he came down from Canada. He renounced the Catholic Church. He became this real fervent anti-Catholic guy. And in 1850, he got involved in a defamation lawsuit, and he hired this young lawyer whose name was Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln helped him get this defamation lawsuit dismissed. And as far as anybody knows, that was the last time these guys had any dealings whatsoever. But after Lincoln was assassinated, this guy Chiniquy published a memoir in which he claimed that, in fact, he had stayed in touch with Lincoln. And in fact, they were best friends. They were bosom buddies, and that he had secretly been going to the White House while Lincoln was in office.
Did he make all that up?
Yeah, not all of this is totally, not
Bogus.
This is all invented. Yeah, it was totally bogus. But he claimed that Lincoln was telling him all this stuff about how, it was actually the Catholics who were behind the Civil War, and if anything ever happened to him, it was the result of a Jesuit plot.
Oh,
and this
geez.
book.
Hold on for a sec, Colin. We're at a quick break here, but we'll be right back to talk more about your work, Under the Eye of Power, How the Fear of Secret Societies Shapes American Democracy. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Colin Dickey with us. His book is called Under the Eye of Power. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Colin, you were talking about Abraham Lincoln's best friend. Why would that doctor do that?
All right, this guy Chiniquy, who claimed that he was Lincoln's best friend. And this book was like a huge bestseller. Everybody bought this story, even though it was based on nothing. He just wrote this whole memoir about they were best friends. Why did he do it? I think what he had a real bee in his bonnet about Catholicism, and he really thought that the Catholics were out to just undermine everything that's great about America, which I think is pretty nonsensical, but it was a pretty popular belief at the time. And I think it was a way for people to sort of they had been through the Civil War. It had really messed people up, and they were looking for some kind of narrative. And for some reason, this one really just kind of grabbed people's attention, and they sort of allowed them to kind of forget maybe what had happened and why it had happened, I guess.
Tell us about William Morgan and what happened to him.
So this was fascinating. For all of the conspiracy theories around the Freemasons and all the kind of terrible things they've done, the one thing that they really did that's on record that is actually absolutely provable happened in upstate New York in 1826. This guy William Morgan was a Freemason. He got tired of the organization. He decided to leave. He was going to publish a book with the secret rites of the Freemasons, and he was going to make it public. And this annoyed his brothers, and they decided to harass him. They threw him in jail a couple of times on trumped-up charges, trying to get him to recant, and he refused to. The guy who was going to publish it, they burned down his printing press. Finally, in August of 1826, they threw William Morgan in jail again, and then this sort of mysterious figure shows up to bail him out. And at first, Morgan is pretty happy to be released from prison. They realize he doesn't know this guy, and as he's being hustled into a waiting carriage, Morgan shouts to the onlookers on the street, "Help! I'm being murdered!"
Oh, jeez.
That's the last anybody ever saw William Morgan, and nobody knows for sure what happened to him, but it seems like these guys in upstate New York, disappeared him, so to speak, and that as I said, for all of the conspiracy theories around the Freemasons, that's the one act of violence that can actually be attributed to any American Masons.
There was strange violence in this country during these days, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's fascinating that there was a lot of kind of riots around that time, and I think maybe now we think of our history as sort of a pretty peaceful one with a few notable exceptions, but it seems like we had riots pretty regularly, and they were used by different people to kind of gin up bigotry towards people, or to keep people in line, and this Freemason event was actually kind of par for the course, not by the Freemasons themselves, but just by Americans generally. We just seem to like to have a good riot every so often. That seems to be something maybe kind of baked into who we are, I guess.
This is amazing. How did you come upon all these stories, Colin?
It's fascinating. I set out. As I said, I picked as my topic. I was going to look at groups, either real or imagined, who were working behind the scenes to break laws or curtail civil liberties. And I just kind of cast a wide net. And in some cases, just sort of one thing would lead to another, and I would just sort of kind of follow a rabbit hole. And that's how I found out about. I was just kind of looking around for these kind of crazy, these anti-Catholic conspiracy theories like this Chiniquy guy, and that's how I found out about this convent in outside of Boston in 1834. It was another kind of just crazy riot that just happened where the local people in Boston decided they were just going to burn this convent to the ground, and I'd never heard of this before. I've spent a lot of time in Boston. I know a lot of people there. Nobody I know had ever heard of this before. And Boston is known for the Boston Tea Party. It's known as a place that kind of wears its riots proudly on its sleeve. And here was one that nobody was talking about, how they ransacked and destroyed this Catholic convent, based on this faulty notion that people were being held there against their will.
I go to Denver once a month to tape some television programs. You went to the Denver airport to do a little investigating.
I mean, you gotta, right? I don't know what your experience with the Denver airport is, but I've been going there, I don't know, for 20 years or so, and it's always like, why is it so far out? That's my big question. It's like takes forever to get there, and I guess I understand why people might think there's something going on there, just because it seems weirdly out in the middle of nowhere.
And it's huge.
Reason. It's huge, right? And then there's that blue horse. When you come in and out.
You heard the story of that horse. It fell on the architect and killed him.
Yeah, the guy who designed it. Yeah, like it killed him. It fell on his leg, and he bled out. And it's horrifying. I mean, that. Who's that guy? Luis Jimenez is the name of the sculptor, and his work is all over El Paso. I think that's where he's from. So I've seen his work everywhere, and most of it's fine, normal, and that one for some reason is just terrifying.
They say the Denver airport has been constructed for any kind of earth emergency. They would need to put the government leaders underground. Do you think it's out there?
Sure. Why not? I mean, that seems a weird place to put them, though, right? Like, wouldn't you put them near D.C. or something? I mean,
they're the source of power, you would think.
Yeah, right. It is huge. It does ask a lot of questions when you're out there. You're just sort of like, I mean, I went there for a weekend, and I had a flight in the afternoon, and I purposely got there as early as I could so I could just kind of go through security and loiter around and not draw the attention of anybody because I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I just kind of wanted to kind of experience it. And you're right, it's huge. It goes on forever. It doesn't seem to need that much space, and all these sort of kind of minor, maybe architectural decisions all sort of add up, and you start to wonder, is there something really going on here beneath the surface? Maybe not.
We had a congressional hearing today on UAPs. I call them UFOs now, of course. And a lot of people are still suspicious of government, Colin, with respect to hiding information. What do you think of that?
It's interesting. I listened to a lot of that. I've been following that story. That guy, he keeps saying, I can't say anything publicly because it's all classified, which might be true. It made me think of this book, Donald Kehoe's UFOs Are Real from 1960.
Way back.
Yeah, and he had a bunch of guys, also, Air Force pilots and other guys who said, we've seen stuff. And I mean, we've been seeing this story of a guy coming forward and saying he's seen stuff. We've been seeing it for decades. A lot of people I think are acting like this guy. What is the name? Grutch. Like he is, the first guy who's ever done this. But we've got these guys. We've had these guys on record for a long time, and it seems interesting that we keep kind of getting that same story without anything really coming from it.
Why is there so much distrust? And it goes all the way back to the beginning of government.
Yeah, it's weird. In the beginning, when you see kind of fear of secret groups, whether or not it's the Freemasons or the Illuminati or the Catholics or whomever, it's always like people are always worried about government being attacked from the outside. That it's foreign influences. It's French revolutionaries or it's the Pope, and they're going to undermine our great democratic system. We're the first democracy. We've got it all worked out, and so we're deeply paranoid that somebody's going to come in from a foreign power and undermine America. And that shifts by, the post-World War II. Suddenly it's the government who is, the conspirator, the government who's out to get us, the government we stop trusting. And I think that's a weird, fascinating shift that we went from thinking that the government needed to be protected from conspirators to thinking that the government, is itself the main conspirator.
What is a secret society to you?
To me, I think of a secret society in two ways. I think there are literal groups like the Freemasons. I think that's a pretty straightforward secret society, and these guys either are doing something nefarious or not. I think of like Nixon's cronies as a secret society doing something nefarious, kind of working, conspiratorially to break laws. There's this other kind of secret society, which I think we think of as like a much more kind of nebulous and ambiguous and wide-reaching. Like when you talk to people about the Illuminati, it's like, they're capable of doing anything. They're everywhere and anywhere. They're almost kind of magical or supernatural in their ability to sort of reach out and affect everything. And I think we have these kind of two parallel versions of secret societies, one which is kind of grounded in history and one which is maybe a little bit more supernatural, I think.
You investigated the CIA. What did you uncover?
So, one of my favorite stories in the book is this crazy story, and this is absolutely true. The CIA got involved in trying to find drugs like, mostly LSD, but other drugs that they thought could achieve mind control. And they were trying all these different experiments to see if they could get, people to do stuff under LSD. The craziest one happened in San Francisco in the 50s, where they got a apartment which they sort of outfitted and decorated to look like a brothel. And then they got sex workers to bring back Johns from the local bars and clubs in North Beach in San Francisco to this pad. They called it the pad, and it was outfitted with all these two-way mirrors and listening devices. So all these CIA agents could basically watch these people have sex, and these prostitutes would dose their clients with LSD without their knowledge, and then basically have sex with them. And the CIA agents would just watch and take notes. And this was called Operation Midnight Climax was the code name for it. And this went on. What did
they expect to learn?
I mean, I don't know that they really. I think maybe they were just a little bit voyeuristic. I mean, I don't know that they ever got anything useful. I mean, you can imagine this. Taking LSD without your knowledge or consent probably messes you up something, because you don't really know what's going on, and all of a sudden your perception is all changed. But I don't, I guess they thought maybe it would lead to some kind of revelation about, mind control or persuasiveness, or maybe getting people to do things against their will in kind of a Manchurian Candidate way. But I don't think they ever got anything useful. I think they just liked it, and they were getting, taxpayers to basically pay them for this, kind of crazy kind of sex sting operation they were running.
You have a chapter about a situation in 1834 outside of Boston where mobs burned down a convent. What did they do?
Yeah, right. So again, these kind of anti-Catholic conspiracy theories that were really popular in the 19th century. And these guys decided that, these Catholic priests were using the confessional as maybe kind of part blackmail, part mind control to, enslave young women who were being held there against their will. And so this rumor kept spreading to the point where they decided they were just going to break into this convent, liberate all the women. They figured that there was maybe sort of unwanted children who had been murdered and buried in the basement. So they hustled all these women out, who were, of course, horrified and confused because that was their home. They didn't want to be liberated. They were fine. These guys didn't find anything. They didn't find any evidence of anything because there wasn't anything. But they decided to burn the convent down to the ground anyways, and they did. Luckily they didn't kill anybody. But this was again one of Boston's sort of notable riots, but one that maybe was a little bit more infamous than the Boston Tea Party, so it doesn't get talked about a lot, and it's been more or less forgotten, but it definitely happened. It was definitely part of Boston's crazy history.
You've written other books, Ghostland and American History and Haunted Places, The Unidentified, about those monsters. This one, are they all still available?
Oh yeah, they're all out there wherever books are sold. You can get them on Amazon, you can get them at your local bookstore. So yeah.
How did you get involved in all this, Colin?
I think I got involved with this basically from growing up next to the Winchester Mystery House when I was a kid. You mentioned this before. This is kind of one of the most haunted houses in the country. It's so beautiful and strange. And I think growing up as a suburban kid who just, thought the suburbs were pretty boring, here was this crazy house in the middle of nowhere. And it kind of got me thinking about ghosts. And, I wrote this book about, why, like the history behind some of these haunted houses. And from there, I wanted to understand, what comes after ghosts? Well, probably Bigfoot, this kind of, things that are hiding out in the trees or on the top of the Himalayas or, in lakes. And so I've kind of just been looking for these hidden places, hidden groups, hidden monsters, hidden ghosts, anything that seems sort of invisible, but yet is still kind of lurking at the margins. I want to go see what's there and see what's really happening.
What do you think of Bigfoot, real or otherwise?
I would like to have thought that if Bigfoot was real, we would have a little bit more evidence now. I think, growing up as a kid, that you'd see that famous film, the Gimlin-Patterson one, where
classic.
And I remember just as a kid just thinking, wow, that's got to be real. That's got to be out there. It looks so cool, the kind of grainy photos and the shaky footage. But now it's like we've all got phones in our pockets. We've all got great videos. We've all how come the more recording devices we have on hand, the harder it is to get this guy on film. It does kind of raise the bar for believability for me.
It's perplexing to be sure. Colin, we'll come back and take calls with you next on Coast to Coast AM.